The knock on Thomas Mercer's office door came at 7:15 p.m., long after most people had left the academy. He'd been sitting in the dark, staring at crime scene photographs from 1998, trying to find the mistake he must have made. "Come in," he said, without looking up. The woman who entered was in her mid-30s, professionally dressed, with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. She carried herself with the rigid posture of someone holding themselves together by sheer force of will. "Agent Mercer?" Thomas looked up. "I'm not an agent anymore, just Thomas. My name is Rebecca Henderson," the woman said. Her voice was controlled, but Thomas could hear the tremor beneath it. "My mother was Jennifer Henderson. She was the third victim of the West Side Strangler of Marcus Holloway." Thomas felt his chest constrict. He remembered Jennifer Henderson, 32 years old, elementary school teacher, found in an alley behind her apartment building. He remembered her funeral. Rebecca would have been 8 or 9 years old then, sitting in the front pew between her father and grandmother. "Ms. Henderson." Thomas started to stand, but she raised a hand. "Don't, please, I need to ask you something." She took a step closer. "Did you make a mistake? Did you put the wrong man in prison?" The question hung in the air between them, sharp and terrible. "I don't know," Thomas said honestly. "The courts say there were procedural errors. I'm reviewing the case to determine." "I didn't ask what the court said." Rebecca's voice was harder now. "I asked you. You, the man who looked me in the eye at my mother's funeral and promised me you'd caught the man who killed her. Was that promise a lie?" Thomas met her gaze. "I believed it was the truth. With everything I had, I believed Marcus Holloway killed your mother. But now I'm not certain." Rebecca's composure finally cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but her voice remained steady. "Do you know what that conviction meant to me? For 25 years, I've been able to sleep at night because I knew. I knew the monster who took my mother was locked away. I've built my entire adult life on that certainty. I became a prosecutor because of you, because you showed me that justice was possible." She wiped her eyes roughly. "And now you're telling me that everything, my career, my sense of safety, my ability to move forward, it was all built on, what? Your mistake? Your desperation? Your need to close a case?" "Ms. Henderson, my daughter's 8 years old," Rebecca continued. "The same age I was when Mom died. Every time I look at her, I think, at least the man who did this is in prison. At least she doesn't have to be afraid. But that man is free now. And I don't know if he's the real killer or if the real killer is still out there, has been out there this whole time, maybe killed more women while we all thought justice had been served." She moved closer to Thomas's desk, placing both hands flat on its surface, leaning in. "So I'm going to ask you one more time, Agent Mercer, and I need you to look me in the eye and tell me the truth. Did you catch my mother's killer, or did you just catch someone convenient?" Thomas looked at this woman, this child he'd failed to protect, now grown and demanding answers he didn't have, and felt something inside him shatter. He whispered. "God help me, I thought I did. But the truth is, I don't know anymore." Rebecca straightened, nodding slowly. "Then you need to find out. Not for you. Not even for Holloway, but for my mother. For all 6 of them. They deserve to know their killer was actually caught. And if he wasn't," she turned toward the door, then paused. "Then you owe it to them to find him. For real this time." She left, closing the door softly behind her. Thomas sat in the darkness, surrounded by photographs of 6 dead women, and realized with devastating clarity his entire legacy, everything he'd built over 40 years of service, rested on whether he'd been right or wrong about one man. And he no longer knew the answer. The next morning, when Marcus Chen found Thomas in his office, the old man hadn't gone home. He was still wearing the same clothes, his eyes were bloodshot, and his desk was covered with files from 1998. "Thomas," Marcus stood in the doorway, concerned. "Did you stay here all night? The Henderson case." Thomas didn't answer the question. His eyes locked on a trial transcript. "The DNA sample. July 14th, 1998. I personally drove it to the Sacramento lab. There's a 3-hour gap. 3 hours with no documentation." Marcus entered, sat across from the desk. "Thomas, you followed procedure. Everyone from back then confirms. My wife was moved to hospice care that afternoon." Thomas's voice was hollow. "I got the call at 3 p.m. By 6 p.m. I was back at work. By midnight, I was driving evidence across state lines because I couldn't wait for normal processing." He finally looked at Marcus. What if that sample was compromised during those 3 hours? What if I thought I was following procedure, but actually wasn't because my mind was elsewhere. The lab reports were clean, Marcus said gently. There were no signs of contamination, but the defense attorney proved it was possible at trial. Thomas pushed a file toward Marcus. Look, testimony from the appeals hearing. A forensic expert stated that if the sample sat in my car trunk for 3 hours on a hot July day without air conditioning, the DNA could degrade and cross-contamination could occur. Marcus read the document, his brow furrowing. This is speculative. It doesn't prove it actually happened. But it proves it could have happened. Thomas stood abruptly, his voice rising. And if it could, then I might have put an innocent man in prison for 25 years. Or you caught a guilty man and the system released him on a technicality. Marcus stood too. Thomas, you know this. Appeals often overturn convictions on procedural grounds. It doesn't prove guilt or innocence. Then how will I know? Thomas slammed his fist against the wall, startling Marcus. How can I know anything? If I was wrong about this case, where else was I wrong? Marcus took a deep breath. Okay, Thomas, let's go through this again, together, from the beginning. We'll look at all the evidence, read all the statements, and we'll find the truth. And if the truth is that I was wrong, then we fix it. Marcus touched Thomas's shoulder. But you're not doing this alone. Understood? Thomas nodded, but Marcus could see the fear in his eyes hadn't faded. Sarah Kim joined them that afternoon, arms full of old files and her laptop. The three of them set up in the conference room and turned the whiteboard into a war room. 6 victims, Sarah wrote on the board. Jennifer Henderson, Patricia Morrison, Linda Zhao, Angela Reeves, Denise Kimball, and Maria Santos, all killed between October 1997 and June 1998. All between 25 and 35 years old, Marcus added. All lived alone, all abducted while walking home from work in the evening. Thomas sat quietly, looking at each photograph. He remembered their faces, all of them. He remembered every conversation with their families, every promise he'd made. Marcus Holloway, Sarah continued, pinning a photo to the board. 38 years old at the time. Single, tenant in a West Side apartment. Worked as a computer programmer. Prior record. 2 harassment incidents involving women, 1 stalking charge. Clear. The behavioral profile was a perfect match, Thomas said quietly. Solitary male, socially awkward but intelligent, history of problems with women. All 6 victims lived within a 5-mile radius of his apartment. And the confession, Marcus added. Thomas, you conducted that interrogation. I made you review it with me. That confession was real, detailed. It contained information only the killer could have known. Thomas nodded but said nothing. Sarah looked at her laptop, but at appeal, the defense raised 3 major issues. First, the DNA chain of custody. Second, Thomas's personal situation. His wife was dying. He was overworking. Third, Holloway wasn't given a lawyer during the confession. He waived his right to counsel, Thomas defended. On tape, he chose to speak of his own free will, but his lawyer argued at trial that he was under duress, Sarah said gently, and the jury seems to have believed it. Marcus walked to the whiteboard. Okay, let's think about this. If Holloway really is innocent, then who's the real killer? Still out there, Thomas said, his voice cracking, which means he's been walking free for 25 years, maybe killed more women. And I caught the wrong man. If, Marcus emphasized. Thomas, this is still hypothetical. We haven't proven. Rebecca Henderson came here last night. Thomas finally looked at them. Jennifer Henderson's daughter. She looked me in the eye and asked, "Did you catch my mother's killer?" And I couldn't tell her. I couldn't say yes. The room fell silent. Then let's find out, Sarah said, her voice determined. The real answer, whoever it is. For 3 days they tore the case apart. They read every statement. They examined every evidence photo. They reconstructed every timeline, and when they found something, it wasn't what Thomas expected. Here, Sarah pointed to her laptop screen, from Holloway's confession, when he described the Henderson crime scene. Marcus and Thomas leaned in, reading the transcript. Mercer, where did you take Jennifer Henderson? Holloway, to the alley on Grant Street, behind her apartment building. Mercer, how did you position the body? Holloway, on her back, arms at her sides. I put a business card in her pocket. Thomas froze. The business card? Yes, Sarah said. But here's the strange part. That business card was never released to the public. It wasn't in the press. Only our team and the killer knew about it, which is why it proved the confession was real, Marcus said. Only the real killer could have known that detail. Right, Sarah said, but look at this. She scrolled through screens. This is the Patricia Morrison case. The second victim. Police report, dated November 22, 1997. The report documented Morrison's body being found in a parking garage. But the interesting part was a note at the bottom of the report. Note, business card found in victim's pocket, unsigned, maybe attacker's signature, withhold from press. Patricia Morrison had a business card too, Sarah said, and this report in the FBI file system. Who was it shared with? Marcus checked the access log. Then his face paled. Thomas, you and 2 other agents. But also, system records show someone accessed this file electronically. May 1998, a month before Holloway was arrested. Who? Thomas asked. Sarah turned the screen. Marcus Holloway, computer programmer credentials used to access the police database. He had legal access because he did software maintenance for the police department. Thomas's head was spinning. You're saying Holloway hacked the database, learned about the business card detail, and then used it in his confession? Worse, Marcus said, opening another file. If he knew about the business card, maybe he knew other details too. Look, electronic access to crime scene reports for all 6 victims, all from Holloway's IP address. Sarah leaned back. He wasn't just a computer program. He was a cyber criminal. He broke into the police database, learned all the details, and then, when he confessed, he used that information. He fooled you. But why? Marcus asked. If he's innocent, why make himself look guilty? Thomas spoke slowly, the pieces finally coming together. Because he's a psychopath. Remember what he told me in his confession? I didn't kill them, but I could have. I wanted to. He's not a real killer, but in his mind, he is. And he wanted to test me. If I, the best profiler, believed his lie, then he wins. And you did, Sarah said softly. Yes. Thomas buried his head in his hand. I did. Because the confession fit everything. Because it told me what I wanted to hear. Because I was desperate. Marcus stood up. But Thomas, this isn't your fault. He created an elaborate plan to fool you by hacking the system. Who would expect that? I should have, Thomas whispered. Because that's my job. To read people, to detect liars. And I failed. No, a strong voice came from the back of the room. All 3 turned. Standing in the doorway was Rebecca Henderson. But this time, she wasn't alone. 5 other women stood with her, different ages, but all with the same expression on their faces, pain and hope. You're the families of the 6 victims. Thomas stood, his voice breaking. Rebecca nodded. Sarah Kim called us, told us what you found, and we all thought we should talk. One of the victims' brothers, a middle-aged man named David Morrison, stepped forward. My name is David Morrison, Patricia's brother, and Agent Mercer. I want to tell you something. Thomas waited, bracing for devastating accusation. Thank you, David said. Thomas was stunned. What? 25 years ago you gave us hope, David continued. When my sister died, our family fell apart. But you came, and you made a promise, and that promise held us together. Yes, the conviction was overturned. Yes, Holloway is free. But I know you tried to do everything right, and now, 25 years later, you're still searching for the truth. That matters. Rebecca added. Holloway manipulated you. He manipulated the system. But you still care about my mother, about all of them. Some people would have given up, but you didn't. The other family members nodded. Thomas tried to hold back tears. But if I caught the wrong man, then we'll find the right one, another family member said. Together. Because Agent Mercer, you taught us something. Justice sometimes takes time, but it's never impossible. Learning that the confession was hacked was one thing. Finding the real killer was entirely another. If Holloway didn't do it, Marcus looked at the whiteboard, then who did? Sarah went back to the file. Let's look at the original suspect list. Who else was investigated before Holloway was arrested? Thomas pulled out his old notes. 12 potential suspects. Holloway was the strongest profile match, but there were others. They went through the list. Robert Chen, a victim's neighbor, history of harassment but had alibis during the murders. David Kramer, security guard, had access to all victims but passed polygraph test. Leonard Shaw, former police officer fired for harassment charges, was out of town when murders started. Michael Torres, computer technician, proximity to victims but no physical evidence. Wait, Sarah looked at the screen. Michael Torres, he was also in computers, like Holloway. Marcus leaned forward. Did we know if they knew each other? Thomas shuffled through old interrogation notes. I asked Holloway. He denied knowing Torres. But what if he lied? Sarah searched on the computer. Michael Torres, still living in Riverside, still in the same apartment. Marcus, Sarah, and Thomas exchanged glances. We need to question him, Marcus said. At 5 p.m., they knocked on Michael Torres's door. A medium-height man in his 50s opened the door. Michael Torres? Marcus showed his badge. Yes? Torres looked nervous. Riverside Police. We have some questions about an old case. May we come in? Torres hesitated, then opened the door wider. His apartment was clean but sparse. Minimal furniture, several computer monitors. Thomas looked around. Something felt familiar. Mr. Torres, Marcus began. Do you remember the West Side murders from 1997 to 1998? Torres nodded. Of course. It was terrible. But why are you asking about this? Because at the time, you were one of the suspects, Thomas said. But you were never charged. Torres frowned. Because I didn't do anything. Do you know Marcus Holloway? Sarah asked. Who? The West Side Strangler, Marcus said. He was convicted. Now he's been released. Something changed in Torres's face, just for a moment, but Thomas saw it. Recognition. Fear. No, Torres said. I never heard that name. Are you sure? Thomas leaned forward. Because you were both in the computer industry. You might have attended the same conferences. I don't know. Torres stood abruptly, his voice rising. Why are you here? I didn't do anything. Marcus raised a calming hand. Mr. Torres, no one's accusing you. Then please leave. But Thomas didn't move. His eyes scanned the room, and he saw something. On the wall, a framed photograph, a family photo. Torres is a young man with his parents, and in the background, a parking garage. Thomas's heart raced. Where was this photo taken? Torres turned. What? This photo, the background, that parking garage. Where is it? Torres swallowed. I don't remember. But Thomas remembered. Patricia Morrison's body had been found in a parking garage, and this garage looked familiar. Sarah searched on her phone. Then she looked at Thomas, her eyes wide. Thomas, the garage where Patricia Morrison's body was found. It's at 1445 Maple Street. Thomas looked at Torres. And what's the address of this apartment? 1447 Maple, Marcus said slowly. Next building over. Torres backed away. That's a coincidence. No, Thomas said, his voice calm but firm. It's not a coincidence. You're a computer technician, like Holloway. And you knew Holloway, didn't you? Because he protected you. Torres' face drained of color. That's how it happened. Thomas continued, the pieces falling into place. You killed the women. Holloway knew. Maybe he saw. Maybe you told him. But he didn't turn you in. Instead, he took the blame. Because he's a psychopath, and he wanted to control you. No, Torres whispered. But then the conviction was overturned, Marcus added, and Holloway's free. And he's not protecting you anymore. Torres collapsed, falling to his knees, and he confessed. I didn't want to kill them, he sobbed, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't control it. And Marcus, he understood me. He said he could help, but I had to let him take the punishment. Sarah grabbed her phone, called for police. Thomas knelt in front of Torres, his voice soft but determined. Michael, listen. It's time to tell the truth now. Everything. Not just for you, but for 6 women and their families. Torres nodded, tears streaming down his face. I knew them. They all lived or worked in my apartment complex. I installed security systems. I knew their routines. When they were alone. And Marcus Holloway? Thomas asked. How did he get involved? Torres took a deep breath. One night, he saw me. Leaving a bar, following Jennifer Henderson, he stopped me, talked to me, and somehow, he knew. He knew what I'd done, but he didn't call the police. Instead, he told me to come inside. Inside where? Sarah asked, shocked. His house. And we talked for hours. He was like me. Felt the same things, but he'd never acted on it. I had. And he was jealous, but also fascinated. Thomas swallowed. Did he watch you? Torres nodded. After each murder, I told him everything, every detail, and he'd listen, take notes, like it was a research project. Then when he was arrested, he promised me, I'll go in for you, but in return, you're mine. Forever. He controlled you, Marcus said, psychologically. Yes, and I was free, but not free, because every day I knew he was in prison for me, and now he's out and I'm scared. Police sirens could be heard outside. Thomas stood. Michael Torres, you're under arrest for the murders of 6 women. 3 days later, Thomas Mercer found himself in the visiting room of San Quentin State Prison. But this time, Marcus Holloway wasn't a prisoner. He'd come as a free man, voluntarily. The 2 men sat across from each other, a table between them. I knew you'd come, Holloway smiled. You're always so predictable, Thomas. Torres confessed. Thomas said bluntly, everything, how you protected him, how you took the blame, how you controlled him. Holloway shrugged. He was weak. I was strong. Law of nature. You're not a serial killer, Thomas said, but you are a psychopath, and you used Torres as a weapon to test me. And you failed. Holloway's smile widened. Spectacularly. You, the great Thomas Mercer, believed a lie because you wanted to, because your wife was dying and you needed a win. Thomas leaned back. You're right. Holloway showed surprise. What? You're right. I failed. I should have seen your manipulation, but I didn't, because I was emotionally compromised. I wasn't objective, and because of that, you spent 25 years in prison. Holloway's smile faded. So what now? Are you going to apologize? No, Thomas said, because you don't deserve an apology. You allowed Torres to kill 6 women. You encouraged him. You protected him. Morally, you're as guilty as he is, but legally, you're innocent. So I'm free. No, Thomas leaned forward, because now Torres is talking, and the DA is offering you a deal. If you testify as an accomplice to Torres's crimes, maybe you avoid prison time. But if you refuse, they'll charge you with solicitation to commit murder, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. Holloway's face tightened. You can't prove that. Torres's testimony, the letters you wrote him while in prison, and most importantly, your own confession, showing you used information hacked from databases to create a false confession. That proves intent to manipulate the system. A long silence. What do you want? Holloway finally asked. The truth, Thomas said, on record. All of it. Your relationship with Torres, what you knew about the murders, why you did it. Holloway looked at Thomas for a long time. Then, slowly, he began to laugh. You know what, Thomas? I genuinely admire you. 25 years later, and you're still searching for justice. Then give it to me. Holloway took a deep breath. Okay, I'll talk. But on one condition. What? You talk too, publicly, to the press, and you admit you made a mistake. You compromised the system. And if someone like me could fool you, others could too. Maybe they already have. Thomas nodded. Agreed. 2 weeks later, the Riverside Police Academy held a major press conference. The room was packed with journalists, cameras pointed in every direction. The police chief, Marcus Chen, Sarah Kim, and Thomas Mercer sat at the podium. The chief approached the microphone. Today, we're announcing a major development in the 1997 to 1998 West Side murders. Michael Torres has been arrested and charged with the murders of 6 women. Marcus Holloway's conviction was correctly overturned. He did not commit these murders. However, he's being charged with conspiracy and obstruction of justice in Torres's crimes. A reporter stood. Agent Mercer, what was your role in the original investigation? Thomas approached the microphone. For a long moment, he was silent. Then he spoke. I was the lead profiler, and I made a mistake. The room fell silent. My wife was dying of terminal cancer, Thomas continued. I was overworking. I was emotionally compromised. And Marcus Holloway, a psychopath, saw my weakness. He manipulated me. He hacked the police database to create a false confession, and I believed it. Journalists frantically took notes. But this isn't just my story, Thomas said. This is a story about the system. All of us in law enforcement must acknowledge that we're human. We make mistakes. We have biases. We have blind spots. And if we don't acknowledge these, justice is compromised. Another reporter. Do you have regrets? Thomas's eyes filled. Every day. But regret isn't enough. Action is required. That's why we're launching a new program at police academies. Cognitive bias and justice. Every detective will learn to recognize manipulation, bias, and emotional compromise. A voice came from the back of the room. Agent Mercer? Thomas turned. Rebecca Henderson was standing, but this time there was no anger on her face, only peace. Thank you, she said, for finding the truth, for my mother, for all of them. Thomas nodded, unable to speak. After the press conference ended, Marcus and Thomas walked outside. How do you feel? Marcus asked. Thomas looked at the sky. Light. For the first time in 25 years, truly light. Because you finally know the truth. No, Thomas turned, looking at Marcus. Because I finally accepted. I'm not perfect. And that's okay. Marcus smiled. Took you long enough to teach me that. Me too. 3 months later, Thomas Mercer taught the first Cognitive Bias and Justice seminar. The classroom was full. 50 young detectives, notebooks ready, eager. Thomas stood at the front of the whiteboard. Good morning. My name is Thomas Mercer, and I'm going to talk to you about my greatest failure. Everyone in the room paid attention. In 1998, I convicted the wrong man, Thomas said, with good intentions, with solid evidence, and with complete belief. But I was wrong, and it cost an innocent man 25 years of his life. He wrote on the board, BIAS plus EMOTIONALCOMPROMISE equals JUSTICEFAILURE. This course will teach you how to avoid these traps. It will show you that the most dangerous enemy isn't out there. It's in your own mind. A student raised his hand. Agent Mercer, if you made such a mistake, how can you still teach? Thomas smiled. Because I made that mistake. I lived it, and I survived. And now, it's my job to make sure you don't make the same mistake. After class ended, Marcus came to the office. How did it go? Good, Thomas said. But you know what? For the first time, I didn't feel like a fraud. Because you're not, Marcus said. You're a human being. And the best teacher is the one who's broken but shows you they healed. Thomas touched his shoulder. You were my greatest success, Marcus. Because I taught you everything, good and bad, and you're still here. I always will be, Marcus said, because this is a two-way street. You taught me. Now I'm holding you up. That evening, when Thomas returned home, he found an envelope on his desk. Inside, a letter from Rebecca Henderson. Dear Thomas, my mother deserved justice, and she finally got it. You gave her that justice. It took 25 years. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. You taught me something. Our mistakes don't define us. How we learn from them does. Thank you. Not just for finding the truth, but for having the courage to accept it. With respect, Rebecca Henderson. Thomas folded the letter, smiling. Then he went to his study. On the wall, Catherine Price's photograph still hung, but next to it he now added 6 new photos. Jennifer Henderson and the other 5 victims. You can rest now, he whispered. Justice came late, but it came. And for the first time, looking at those photographs, he felt not just guilt, but peace, because he'd finally learned. He didn't have to be perfect. He just had to be honest, and that was enough.